When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. In today's video, I wanted to talk about a video that had been made by whycreate. And if you don't know what the video that I'm referring to is, it's going to be the top 3 Targaryens power-wise, and the video he made. Now, I am myself going to be making my own list, and I'm going to be kind of referencing his video and talking about his video and the characters he had involved in there as well. So I'm going to put the link in the description if you guys wanted to watch his video and then come back. That'll be in the description. I think it was a really great idea and a video that was really good for starting conversation. So this is going to be kind of a video extension off of that and talking about how I kind of vary from his opinions. I get what he was saying, but for me, I'm a bit different in how I kind of viewed the Targaryens. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment, please do. It helps channel grow, reach our people that might like this channel as well. And let's get into it. So I'm going to have 5 characters I want to kind of talk about. I'm going to mention some other characters as well. And I wanted you guys to know, let me know who you guys think are some of the most powerful Targaryens. Because in my opinion, this is a tough one to do. Because there's power as in dragons, like were you a great dragon rider, were you a great swordsman, were you a great king or queen or politician? What makes someone powerful? So that's something that we have to kind of talk about in this video. And I think it's going to be interesting because I have a couple characters that maybe weren't in whycreate's video that I believe probably should have been. But yeah. So I want to start off with one that was on his list and should be on mine as well. Again, these are going to be in no particular order because I think it's very difficult to substantiate one person from the next because a lot of these characters are going to be on here for different reasons. So I think for me, I'm going to probably stay away from doing an actual ranking. So these are going to be just my 5 Targaryens that I think are the most powerful, most skilled, or most impactful. As I'm actually thinking about this, we're going to do a top 6. I have 6 characters I want to talk about in this list because I think one character on here, to talk about them, I need to talk about another character. So we're going to get to that when I get to there. But starting off with the one that I think I'm the most okay with is Bloodraven. So Bloodraven was on his list as well, and that was his number 1. I would put him on here, but I would loosely put him on here almost because the dragons really were not a thing during Bloodraven's time. At this point, they were kind of out of the world and all of that. Where dragon riders were not really a normal occurrence at this point of history in the Targaryens. So for power reasons, you already don't have that. But Bloodraven was a very competent military commander. And he also, not only alongside of those things of being, in my opinion, a good politician, alongside of being a good military commander, is the idea that all of these powers that he does inevitably get that we're starting to learn about with Bran. So I think putting him on this list makes a lot of sense because he brings a lot to the table, coming with the old gods and his powers in that way, right? So I think he does deserve to be on the list. I think whycreate got that one right. And I guess I'll talk about his other 2 because his other 2 are not going to be on my list. Daenerys is not going to be on my list. Now, I think the argument could be used that Daenerys is powerful as in she was the one to bring dragons back into the world, which is definitely a big accomplishment. But when you look at power reasons of, I have what, 2 people on here that are going to end up being probably the 2 best kings, or at least up there for the Targaryens. And then I also have people that are either extremely skilled warriors, or something along those lines, that Daenerys kind of doesn't fit in there, right? She doesn't have the power with the dragons yet. I mean, she has 3 dragons, but again, when you're looking at a lot of the characters on this list that were very present in the time of the dragons, someone like a Jaehaerys and Aegon had bigger dragons and more of them. But I think Daenerys is an interesting one because I think by the end of the story, when the dragons are fully grown and she comes into her own power, like in her own right, I think you could definitely put her on this list. But as of right now, I don't view her as being on that list. I think maybe whycreate maybe put her on the list for her potential more than how powerful she actually is right now. And that's fine. That's his way of doing it. But for me, I don't believe she should be on here. So another character that I think he put on his list that I just didn't think felt right was Visenya. So Visenya is an interesting one because she's one of the main three. She's Aegon the First, the Conqueror's sister. She is definitely a very competent warrior. She's right up there with Aegon, probably maybe even better. And she has Vhagar as well. So the thing is, the reason I think Visenya is not on here is that you look at how can you put Visenya above a character like Aegon the Conqueror when Aegon the Conqueror is the one that ends up being king. He has all the power. He's a very competent fighter in his own right. I would say he's probably just below Visenya, if not on par with her. So I think that's my big problem with his list is Aegon the Conqueror in a top 3 powerful list should be on there instantly. Like, he should be alive. I think there's 2 characters that, if you're going to do a top 3, are locks for me. I think when I watched that video, I was very surprised with his rankings because there's 2 characters for me, Aegon the Conqueror being one, that should be instantly on there for me. But let me know what you guys think on that. So, moving on, I think from the characters that I don't have on this list. Also, I don't have Rhoenyra on here, but she is my favorite Targaryen, so I decided to put her as the background image. But, or I guess she's my favorite Targaryen history character, or Targaryen in general. I don't think she should be on here because of, one, when she was a queen and her power as a queen, she wasn't the best. And again, there's a lot of things that went into that because of losing a lot of her children, a lot of mental things going on, but she did control a lot of dragons at this point. She wasn't really a fighter or anything like that, so that's why I couldn't really, you can't really argue putting Rhaenyra on the list of my top, like, I guess 6, over someone like Visenya. That really doesn't make sense to me. I think Visenya would be higher than Rhaenyra if I was going to do like a top 15 or something like that. So, yeah, I just want to explain why she was the background. But getting into like my actual top 6 outside of like Bloodraven, who I talked about a little bit already, I think Aemon the Dragon Knight should also be on here. I think Aemon is such a important figure where we're constantly being told about him, even after his, you know, death or whatever and all that stuff, and after so long of time has passed where people still talk about him. He is renowned as one of the greatest fighters in all of history, in Westeros history. So I think not having someone on here like that is a bit interesting because of how influential he was to House Targaryen and the kind of legacy he carries as a character. He was also a Kingsguard to 4 kings, did his job really well. He staved off assassination attempts, was part of leading wars and stuff like that in Dorne. So I think for me, I think Aemon the Dragon Knight definitely deserves at least a shout out in that top 6. Again, not doing these in a ranking of how powerful they are, but kind of just ranking or just doing my top 6 in a general list. Moving on from that, I actually have Daemon Targaryen. So Daemon Targaryen, and the one I'm referring to, is the one we will see during House of the Dragon, as well as that goes on with the Dance of the Dragons. So Daemon is, again, he's kind of reminds me of Euron almost, where he literally takes over an entire area of land and basically becomes like the king of that area, basically. I mean, there's some things that go on, but he more or less conquers an entire area of land. He is so important. He starts the Golden Cloaks. He kills Vhagar. I mean, I guess that's a spoiler for the show, but I feel like if you're watching this video, you kind of already know that. He, to me, is the muscle of the Blacks, of Rhaenyra, and he is one of the most established and greatest fighters with the Targaryens. He is just, I think, for me, a character that deserves to be in that kind of that top 6 range for me. You look at his kind of his power and how influential he was during the Dance of the Dragons kind of time period. I think he deserves to be kind of in that top 6 range. Now, moving on to the last 2, I've already talked about one, Aegon the Conqueror. I believe Aegon the Conqueror has to be in your list if you're doing a top like 5, top 3 for anything, because, or for Targaryens, not for anything, but because Aegon the Conqueror, not only did he kind of unite all of Westeros outside of Dorne And I know he had help from his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys, but Aegon was the kind of person in charge. He was the person making the decisions. He was the one with the final say. He rode the greatest dragon of kind of Targaryens ruling in Westeros, being Balerion. It's impossible for me, and if you even look at Aegon as a sword fighter, was a very competent sword fighter, as we're kind of told. He's kind of, well, maybe a little less than Visenya, but he's kind of up there. He was pretty good, and when he was able to rule, he was able to put down rebellions and stuff like that pretty easily, if there even were any, because most people would wait to do those rebellions after Aegon dies. He, to me, is a character that is kind of like if you're American, kind of a George Washington, where he sets the precedent of kind of the Targaryen rule. To me, if you're looking at just power levels, he has to be up here. He had control of 3 of the biggest dragons, if not the biggest, in Targaryen history. He's the one that unifies all of Westeros, really, besides Dorne again. So I think, again, he has to be on the list. And that was the one, to me, that was a shock. That was not on the top 3 most powerful on his list. And he's even saying that Aegon was 4th. If I was going to make a list on here, Aegon the Conqueror would probably be easily in my top 3. I'd probably say maybe 2 or 1, depending on how I feel about the last 2 characters I'm going to talk about on this list. But yeah, no, so I think Aegon definitely should be on here. Now, the last 2 I'm going to talk about are a joint kind of pair because they go together, but Jaehaerys and also Alysanne, because if you look at these 2, this is the best ruling in all of Westeros history, in my opinion, right? Of all the kingdoms combined, there's very little warfare going on. Everything's kind of handled peacefully. And this, to me, in Jaehaerys' rule alongside of Alysanne, is where the Targaryens are almost at their most powerful, where they have a ton of dragons. They have extra dragons on Dragonstone. This is the time of the dragons, right? Where no one's kind of stupid enough to kind of rebel against the crown at this point because it'd be so dumb to. And Jaehaerys keeping a 50-year peace, basically, is unheard of in Westeros, right? If you read Fire and Blood, right, think about how it starts, right? Fire and Blood starts with an Aegon the Conquest and all that stuff. For about 20 years, there's not even really 20 years of relative peace with Aegon because he also invades Dorne, and that doesn't go well. But you kind of have maybe a 10, 15-year period where you have peace, and then Aenys comes along and rebellions kind of starts going everywhere. And then you have a civil war with the Targaryens with Maegor, and then Jaehaerys takes the throne, and you have relative peace for a good 50 years, and then you have more rebellions after Jaehaerys, and then leading to the Dance with Dragons, and then you have a bunch of stuff leading into the aftermath of that. Having peace in the kingdoms is something unheard of. So I think Jaehaerys, and alongside Alysanne as well, being able to rule the kingdoms that well, and through kind of fear, but also with love and with wisdom, and kind of using all of the things that kept the Targaryens of power to their betterment. And I think you have to talk about Alysanne when you look at Jaehaerys as well, because she was someone that was able to do, the other things that, Jaehaerys wasn't doing, right? Where Alysanne could kind of entertain the ladies of the court. She could do this and that and kind of make people love them as a couple. And that's something that I think goes really, really undervalued when you look at any king in history where you've had that, right? Where if we look at Robert, Baratheon, and Cersei, though most of the country didn't like Cersei because Cersei was not good at that role that Alysanne played. And Robert Baratheon just straight up didn't care about kind of how the kingdoms were ruled. He had other people do that. So to me, I think all of those 6 on there can make sense to me. Maybe I'd do like a top 5 and just say Alysanne and Jaehaerys are kind of one joint. And I think Jaehaerys, to me, was another character that outside of him being the greatest Targaryen king, in my opinion, in ruling time, and that idea, is that he also was someone that he's kind of like Rhaegar in the instance of he didn't really like fighting, but he knew it was very important to kind of keeping the kingdoms in, check, being able to kind of defend himself and be a very good swordsman. And by, his age 16, when he comes into his throne, all of the Kingsguard say he's a very fine fighter, like he can hold his own. So again, I think when you talk about the Targaryens, I think there's a couple characters you just can't leave out of that top 5. I think Jaehaerys and Aegon are 2 of those. I think a lot of the other ones are kind of debatable because if you want to look at Aemon the Dragon Knight, right, the dragons weren't around, so he wasn't a dragon rider. It's kind of difficult to say how much his power is accumulated towards a lot of these other characters with dragons and stuff like that. I think Daemon is a kind of a safe bet because I think Daemon, I would say, was a better fighter than Visenya probably. I think what Visenya has going for her is that Visenya had a better dragon, in that being Vhagar. But I think Daemon, being the better fighter, being more, like, I feel like influential. I don't know. Visenya was very influential as well, but I think you look how much Daemon really accomplished. I think you can make an argument Daemon above Visenya. Daenerys, to me, just hasn't done enough to deserve to be in the top 3. I know she kind of, again, I talked about it in this video earlier, is that she kind of brought, you know, magic kind of back to the world, right, and all that stuff with the dragons hatching, but I don't think that's enough for me to be like, yeah, she's top 3 most powerful, and her dragons aren't really, like, fully, you know, evolved yet, I guess. So, again, that is why she's not on the list. But thank you guys all for watching. Let me know, what do you guys think? Did I leave off some characters that you guys thought would be in here? Do you agree more with whycreate's top 3? Do you agree with kind of my, like, general top 6? What's going on? What do you guys think? But I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.